Questions without notice. Are there any questions? Give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration. An immigration detainee referred to as CHCY had his visa cancelled after he was convicted of raping his 14-year-old stepdaughter whilst his wife was in hospital giving birth. The Albanese Labor government's watering down of the law has allowed this criminal to stay in Australia, making our country less safe. When will the Albanese Labor government apologise for this catastrophic mistake and reverse Direction 99?
Call to the Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his question. Our thoughts are, of course, with the victims in this case. And in saying that, of course, community safety remains our highest priority as a government. I remind the Leader of the Opposition and all members that this was a visa that was cancelled and remained cancelled by my department in line with Ministerial Direction 99. Now, I believe that it's a decision that should still be cancelled, and I advise the House also that I have prioritised a number of cases for urgent cancellation consideration.
Call to the Honourable Member for McEwen.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the budget helping to deliver cost of living relief for Australians and building a better future? What is standing in the way of making our future here?
Order. Order. Members on my left will cease interjecting. Prime Minister has the call.
I thank the member for McEwen for his question. It was good to be in the member for McEwen's electorate, looking at infrastructure related to the very significant intermodal that will be built in his region, which will create many thousands of jobs, boost productivity and make an enormous difference to the region and indeed to the nation. We delivered a budget focused on the things that have driven us over the last 2 years. Firstly, helping with the rising cost of living pressures that people are feeling. And we did that by producing a tax cut for all 13.6 million taxpayers, not just some of them, which is what those opposite wanted. We did that as well by having energy price relief of $300 for every household, not just some, of providing support for every small business as well. We did it by providing stronger Medicare for every part of the community, adding a further 29 urgent care clinics to the 58 that have been up and running. And we did it, of course, by ensuring more homes can be built in every part of the country with our $32 billion plan for homes in Australia. Now, we also, of course, had
Member for Deakin will cease interjecting. The Treasurer The Treasurer and the member for Deakin will cease interjecting for the remainder of the Prime Minister's answer.
We also, of course, had a plan for a future made in Australia. And that's where future economic growth will come from. How do we seize the opportunities from the shifts that are happening in the global economy, the shift to clean energy, of which there is no country you would rather be than Australia, with the resources that we have under the ground that will power global economies in this century, but also the resources we have in the sky through the best solar resources in the world, as well as the opportunity that we have for green hydrogen, to be producing green metals, to be producing advanced manufacturing jobs. Now, for some time they've said no to cost of living relief, but now they're also saying no to a future made in Australia, to making more things here, including no to production tax credits, extraordinarily, something that will reward success of companies that invest in the industries of the future. But those opposite, of course, have nothing to offer, nothing positive, helping no one, taking our country nowhere. You can't build a better future out of saying no. We're getting on with building that better future.
Time has concluded. Give the call to the Honourable the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Minister for Immigration. Sudanese national Emmanuel Saki's visa was cancelled after he was convicted of serious domestic violence offences and threats to kill with a knife. He's now been charged with the stabbing murder of 22-year-old Bosco Mignurano in Brisbane. The Albanese Labor government's watering down of the law has allowed this criminal to stay in Australia, making our country less safe. When will the Albanese government apologise for this catastrophic mistake and reverse Direction 99?
Call to the Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the Deputy Leader of the Opposition for her question. I say again, of course, my thoughts, and I'm sure all our thoughts, are with the victim's family.
Order.
I also say that the person in question is now in custody with a police investigation underway. Again, this was a visa that was cancelled and remained cancelled under Ministerial Direction 99. Now, it was a decision of the AAT, an independent tribunal, to overturn the cancellation of the visa. And I remind the House that the direction places a significant emphasis on serious offending and on family violence. These need to be considered in all matters by the tribunal. I also want to inform the House that I have cancelled the individual's visa. And as this matter is before the courts, I'll say nothing further about this matter.
The call to the member for Dunkley.
My question is to the Treasurer. How is the Albanese Labor government easing cost of living pressures for all Australians and helping to fight inflation? And what approaches were rejected?
Order. Order. The member for Hinkler is warned because not to interject before a minister has even begun is highly disorderly. Treasurer has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Thanks to the member for Dunkley. Because of her efforts, every one of the 73,000 taxpayers in Dunkley will be getting a tax cut, and every single one of the 65,000 households will be getting energy bill relief. Now, Mr Speaker, since Parliament rose at the end of Budget Week, we have been visiting communities, talking to people about the budget, about what it means for them and why it matters for them as well. From Western Sydney to Western Australia, from Logan to Launceston, Mr Speaker, from the Gold Coast to Gladstone, and in Melbourne and Ipswich and regional South Australia and Brisbane. And we know, Mr Speaker, that inflation has moderated a lot since we came to office, but we know that people are still under the pump, which is why the primary purpose of the budget 2 weeks ago was to ease cost of living pressures. Now, most of that cost of living relief is for everyone, Mr Speaker, and some of it is targeted, but all of it will help to take some of the edge off these inflationary pressures that people are feeling.
Order.
In the first instance, Mr Speaker, there is a tax cut for every taxpayer, all 13.6 million of them. As the Prime Minister said, those tax cuts are now less than 5 weeks away. There's energy bill relief for every household and for small business. There's the first back-to-back increase in Commonwealth rent assistance in more than 30 years. We're freezing the cost of prescriptions, Mr Speaker. We're wiping $3 billion in student debt. We're helping students on prac. We're creating more fee-free TAFE places, and we're paying the super guarantee on paid parental leave for the very first time. And by helping with bills, we'll put downward pressure on inflation at the same time. And we know this works because when we did it in the last budget, we were able to take some of the edge off the inflationary pressures in the economy. And the combination of our cost of living help and our responsible economic management is a key reason why inflation is almost half what we inherited from those opposite 2 years ago, Mr Speaker. Now, a key reason why Treasury is now forecasting an earlier return to inflation in the target band is because of our cost of living help. So we have made, Mr Speaker, welcome and encouraging progress when it comes to the fight against inflation, but it doesn't moderate in a straight line. We've seen it zig and zag in other countries already, and we will get some new monthly figures tomorrow. These monthly figures, as I've said a number of times from this dispatch box, they do bounce around a bit. They don't compare the same items month to month. They're less reliable than the quarterly figures. But the overall direction of travel when it comes to inflation is clear. When we came to office, the monthly and quarterly measures of annual inflation were both 6.1%, Mr Speaker, and they're now substantially lower. But they're still too high. That's why our inflation-fighting budget provides cost-of-living relief in the most responsible way at the same time as we invest in Medicare and housing and skills and in the industries which will power our future.
Give the call to the honourable member for Fowler.
Thank you, Speaker. Prime Minister, in 2022, you announced $15 billion in National Reconstruction Fund, supposedly to support manufacturing. This budget, you announced $22.7 billion for your future made in Australia. Manufacturing is the largest employer in Fowler, 40%, and the engine room powering Western Sydney. How much of the $15 billion announced in 2022 has been allocated to support small and medium-sized manufacturing companies in Western Sydney? Thank you.
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Fowler for her question. Well, I'd hope that she's an enthusiastic supporter of our plan for manufacturing, because it compares with those opposite, who of course voted against the National Reconstruction Fund, who voted against it and stopped it going through for a period of time through this parliament and delayed it. But we're getting on with now the National Reconstruction Fund, have its structure set up. It isn't something that has a colour-coded spreadsheet. It's something that will get proper economic analysis for projects. But I hope as well that the member for Fowler was pleased to see 3 new projects in the budget benefiting Fowler: $5 million for Hume Highway Corridor Assessment, $47.5 million for Western Sydney roads, $100 million for Western Sydney rapid bus infrastructure upgrades, $22.5 million for roads to recovery funding for councils in Fowler over 5 years following our increases. Those opposite show their objection to manufacturing. It is an independent...
Order. The Leader of the Nationals is pretty agitated today, so we're just going to dial that down for the remainder of question time, and I'd like to hear from the Deputy Leader of the Opposition on a point of order.
The point of order is on relevance, Mr Speaker. The question did not go to infrastructure. It went to manufacturing.
The question was about how much money was announced for small and medium businesses in Fowler. The Prime Minister is allowed to talk about the electorate. He may give context, but I'm just going to ask him to return to the question.
Exactly right. It was about Fowler, and I'm talking about things that will create jobs in Fowler. In addition to that, the National
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition has made her point of order. We've moved on from there. I'm just going to ask her to cease interjecting. The Prime Minister is being in order, and he's going to be heard in silence,
Thanks,
just as the
Speaker.
member for Fowler was heard in silence.
In addition to that, the National Reconstruction Fund, something very foreign to those opposite, will make objective decisions at arm's length of government about support for manufacturing industry. That's as it should be.
Give a call to the honourable member for Solomon.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government assisting our neighbours and friends in the Pacific with humanitarian assistance and Australian defence support in their time of need, particularly recently in New Caledonia and Papua New Guinea?
Give the call to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Defence.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On Friday morning in Yamali village, west of Mount Hagen in the PNG Highlands, a tragedy of enormous proportions struck Papua New Guinea. And I know that I speak on behalf of every member of this House when I say that we stand in solidarity with our sisters and brothers in Papua New Guinea, remembering that it was PNG who came to our aid in our hour of need 4.5 years ago during the Black Summer bushfires. That is what family, that is what friends do. It is hard to describe the highlands of PNG for those who have not seen it. It is a place which is very remote, but it's not isolated. It's not isolated because it is in fact heavily populated, but it is remote because through large swathes of the highlands, the principal form of transport infrastructure are walking trails, and the main mode of transport is by foot. And it's in this context that this tragedy struck, and so it's very difficult to know exactly what the death toll has been. The International Organisation of Migration, having spoken with nearby villages, estimates the death toll at about 670, but there are other estimates which put that number in the thousands. The truth is we may never know, but what we do know is that right now there are thousands of displaced people and they need our help. From the moment this news broke, our High Commission was working with authorities in Port Moresby. We flew the first representatives of PNG's National Disaster Committee to the site on a RAF Spartan and helicopter. And in addition to the Spartan, which is in PNG, a Hercules has joined it. We have a C-17, which is now ferrying supplies between Australia and PNG. In addition to the disaster response experts who are on their way to PNG now, the emphasis is on helping those who are displaced, and so we are working on transporting 750 family-sized shelters to the site. There is more that we are seeking to do, but to be frank, part of the issue here is about not overwhelming a system which is currently under a lot of stress. But what every Australian should know, and more importantly what every Papua New Guinean should know, is that we will do everything within our power in this moment to help Papua New Guinea through this most difficult time. Mr Speaker, if I can just briefly mention New Caledonia. Over the last couple of weeks we have seen unrest, and the origins of this obviously go back decades. The answer to this has been and continues to be ongoing dialogue. We very much welcome the visit of President Macron to Noumea, and we're working with our French neighbours about how we can provide assistance in this context as well. What we have done is provide 8 flights over the course of the last week or so in which we've transported about 500 people to Australia, most of whom are Australian citizens. Mr Speaker, these two very different incidents remind us of one central fact. We are members of the Pacific family, and every person in the Pacific should know that in the darkest hour, Australia will be there.
On indulgence, the honourable member for Canning.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for his update on Papua New Guinea and New Caledonia. Our ADF men and women are both our first responders and our ambassadors in moments of crisis, and so they go to Papua New Guinea and potentially New Caledonia with our goodwill and support as always. Thank you.
Give the call to the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration. I refer to the Minister's previous answer about Emmanuel Saki, a non-citizen convicted of serious domestic violence offences and unprovoked threats to kill with a knife. Saki's visa was reinstated by the AAT as a direct result of the watering down of the law by the Albanese government and the issuance of Direction 99. Why did the Minister not step in, intervene, cancel a visa before this man went on to allegedly murder a 22-year-old?
Give the call to the order, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition. Give the call to the Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his question. Direction 99 did not decrease the importance placed on considerations such as the expectations of the Australian community and the protection of the community from crime. That is a very important point here, as well as the fact that the visa in question was cancelled and remained cancelled by my department in accordance with Ministerial Direction 99. Now, a number of cases were not raised with me by my department, and I've asked my department for an explanation why. My department is now looking at all these cases as a priority, and they are all under cancellation consideration.
Give the call to the honourable member for Jaga.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Social Services. How is the Albanese Labor government continuing to invest in women's safety initiatives that support the national plan to end violence against women and children? How is this making a practical difference now?
Give the call to the Minister for Social Services.
Thank you, Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Jagajaga for her question, because promoting the safety of women and children experiencing family, domestic and sexual violence is a key priority of our government, and it has been since the day we've been elected. And that's why we have made it a priority to work with states and territories, along with victim survivors, to deliver the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children. And we've backed that up with a $3.4 billion investment. This investment is supporting women and children who are experiencing violence now, and is also focused on preventing violence, intervening before it escalates, and helping the recovery of victim survivors. Now, one of our key investments in this month's budget creates the Permanent Leaving Violence program. Victim survivors now have the certainty of knowing that the safety net will be there should they need it, where they can access $5,000 of support and also access important safety planning, risk assessment and referral to support pathways. Now, the Leaving Violence program builds on improvements we've made to the previous Escaping Violence trial. Early evidence showed that victim survivors needed more than just a payment, and that's why we have and continue to invest in additional resourcing to provide individualised support. And just last week, I heard about the vital impact that this was having when I spoke to frontline workers who said that the individualised supports and, importantly, the risk assessment is actually keeping women safe. Now, Speaker, a key principle of the National Plan is preventing violence. And just this weekend, we launched our National Consent Campaign, designed to encourage parents, caregivers and other adults to understand, learn and talk about consent so that our young people can too. Now, we've appointed an expert panel to conduct a rapid review into best practice prevention approaches. The expert panel will deliver advice to government on how we can strengthen prevention efforts under the National Plan, with a focus on greater consequences and accountability for perpetrators. This will complement a lot of the work underway under our National Plan to strengthen our existing targeted approaches to preventing violence, including our early intervention adolescence program, which does support at-risk young people, particularly at-risk boys who have experienced family and domestic violence, breaking the cycle of it occurring generation after generation. Now, we all need to work together because ending violence against women and children will take all of us working together in a concerted way, and I commend this work to the House.
The call to the member for Wide Bay.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration. A Kenyan national known as XLFM had his visa cancelled after he was convicted of raping the 17-year-old sister of the mother of his infant child and then robbing a petrol station with a meat cleaver. The Albanese Labor government's watering down of the law has allowed this criminal to stay in Australia, making our country less safe. When will the Albanese Labor government apologise for this catastrophic mistake and reverse Direction 99?
Give the call to the Honourable Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Wide Bay for his question. As I've already said, my thoughts and the thoughts of all members, I'm sure, are with the family of the victim here. This was a visa that was cancelled and remained cancelled by my department under Direction 99. Direction 99 did not and does not decrease the importance placed on considerations such as the expectations of the Australian community and the protection of the community from crime. This, Speaker, remains unchanged under this government. Community safety remains the highest priority of this government. And I say again, these were decisions made by an independent tribunal.
Order. Order. When the House comes to order, I'll hear from the member for Canberra.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Indigenous Australians. How are Australians marking Reconciliation Week in 2024, and how is the Albanese Labor government supporting survivors of the stolen generations and advancing reconciliation?
Call to the Minister for Indigenous Australians.
I thank the member for her question and her enduring interest in this issue. Across the country, Australians are marking Reconciliation Week, a time for us to come together to learn and celebrate shared histories, cultures and achievements. A time when the fight for justice and the rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people continues. On Sunday, I attended the Kooda Girls Sorry Day event in Sydney. The Cootamundra Domestic Training Home for Aboriginal Girls was a notorious place, run by the Aborigines Welfare Board to provide so-called training to girls forcibly taken from their families. Except the only training provided to the girls was to be domestic servants. The girls were banned for ever seeing their families, robbed of their connection to culture and country. Many were abused. The resilience, grace and generosity of these women in the face of such pain and dispossession is simply astounding. We are investing a further $3.5 million to support stolen generations of survivors and their families. I also attended Michael Long's long walk before Dreamtime at the G, along with the member for Solomon. Thousands of footy fans gathered to walk together for reconciliation. It's 20 years since Michael set out on his long walk from Melbourne to Canberra to put Aboriginal rights on the national agenda and to advocate for closing the gap. 20 years on, the struggle to close the gap endures. The Albanese government is investing in closing the gap by investing in housing, jobs, health, education and justice. Central to this is establishing a new system of remote jobs and economic development to replace CDP. I remain hopeful that we can close the gap. The story of the Aboriginal justice and rights movement is one of both progress and setbacks. Reconciliation is a long, winding journey. It's not a straight line. But with each step on the journey, we get closer, closer to a better future, closer to justice for First Nations people. I want to thank Karen Mundine and Reconciliation Australia for the work. Now, more than ever, we need to walk together in unity.
Give the call to the honourable member for Moncrieff.
My question is to the Minister for Immigration. The Congolese national, known as HWGF, had his visa cancelled after being jailed for aggravated assault and repeated breaches of domestic violence orders. HWGF has been convicted of a total of 27 separate offences, including multiple counts of violent assault against 2 former partners, their extended families, as well as police. The Albanese Labor government, watering down of the law, has allowed this criminal to stay in Australia, making our country less safe. When will the Albanese Labor government apologise for this catastrophic mistake and reverse Direction 99?
Order. I remind all members of the time limits, but it works both ways. Order. I don't need to be reminded. I can look at the clock like everyone else can. The opposition are entitled to ask their questions. The chamber will remain silent so I can hear from the minister. The minister has the call.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the Shadow Minister for her question. This visa, like the other ones we've been asked about, were cancelled and remain cancelled by my department in line with Ministerial Direction 99. And in
Order. Order. The member for Kennedy is trying to assist the House in his way. Order. Just going to ask the minister to continue and perhaps speak a little louder so the member for Kennedy can hear him.
Thank you, Speaker. I say again that the department cancelled the visas of all these people. And I say also that there are 5 primary considerations, all of which are given equal weighting in Ministerial Direction 99, that need to be taken into consideration. These are, Speaker, protection of the Australian community from criminal conduct, family violence, strength, nature and duration of ties to Australia, best interests of minor children and expectations of the Australian community. Direction 99 did not decrease the importance placed on considerations such as the expectations of the Australian community or community safety. That remains unchanged under this government.
Call to the honourable member for Hawke.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. How is the Albanese Labor government building the workforce for a future made in Australia and opening the doors of opportunity wider for more Australians?
Call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the sensational member for Hawke for his question. 2 weeks ago I told the House the story of Jennifer Baker. Jennifer was a single mum at the age of 19, and she worked in hospitality for 10 years till she saw an ad in the local paper for a Newcastle University fee-free university-ready course. She did that course. Now she's got a science degree, an honours degree and a PhD. These are free courses that are effectively a bridge between school and university to give you the foundational skills that you need to succeed when you're at uni. She's one of 70,000 people who've done one of these courses at Newcastle University over the last 50 years. And I was there last week with the member for Newcastle and got to meet more people like Jennifer who've done these courses. One of them is Liam Gleeson. In his early 20s, Liam struggled with drug addiction and tried to take his own life. He was saved by paramedics and nurses at John Hunter Hospital. It was in that hospital that he decided not only that he wanted to live, but what he wanted to do with his life. He wanted to repay that debt and become a paramedic. Now he's doing one of those free courses and using it as a springboard to a nursing degree and a paramedicine degree. I also met Roy Turner. Roy dropped out of school in Year 10. He became a fitter and machinist, worked in the oil and gas industry. When COVID hit, he lost his job, and that's when his fiancée said to him, "Why don't you do one of these free university-ready courses?" He did that. Now he's doing a degree in medical engineering, from making valves for the oil and gas industry to making valves for hearts. I also met Z Johnson. She did one of these free courses at the age of 48 when she was on a carer's pension looking after her husband who'd had a stroke. In the next few months, she'll complete her honours degree in ovarian cancer research. Next year, she's going to start a PhD. From pension to PhD. That's what these courses do. That's why we're backing them in the budget. That's why we're massively expanding funding for these courses to give more Australians the life-changing chance that Jennifer and Liam and Roy and Z got. We expect it'll double the number of people doing these courses over the next 15 years, help more Australians to get a crack at going to university and succeed when they get there, and help to build the skills that we need for a future made right here in Australia.
Give a call to the Leader of the Australian Greens.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Will you condemn the calls from the Leader of the Opposition that Australia should consider cutting ties with the International Criminal Court if it issues warrants for the arrest of members of Israel's war cabinet? And will you reaffirm Australia's full commitment to the court, including that Australia will seek to arrest any person for whom the court issues a warrant, including the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu?
Order. Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Melbourne for his question. And this government, and indeed this parliament, has been very clear from the beginning. We joined together, most of us, to condemn the terrorist attacks of October 7th. We regard Hamas as a terrorist group. We have called upon Hamas to immediately release all hostages. And there is no equivalent between Hamas and Israel. We said in the motion carried last October that we recognise Israel's right to defend itself. But we also reiterated this Parliament's stance that Australia's consistent position in all contexts is to call for the protection of civilian lives and the observance of international law. We have been consistent. I note as well the impact that has occurred recently in Rafah. We consistently have opposed the ground offensive in Rafah. We expressed our concern that the impact that would have, given that more than half of Gaza's 2.3 million people were sheltering in Rafah and were told to go to Rafah where they would be safe. We must have a humanitarian ceasefire so that civilian life can be protected. We must have increased humanitarian assistance delivered to Gaza. Every innocent life matters, whether it's Israeli or Palestinian, and my government consistently and will consistently support a two-state solution which recognises the right of both Israelis and Palestinians to live in peace and security with prosperity.
The call to the honourable member for Bennelong.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure and Transport. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering cheaper to run, low emissions cars for Australians, and what was standing in the way?
Call to order. I haven't called the minister yet, so there will be no interjections. The call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the member for Bennelong for the question and his advocacy for cleaner and cheaper to run cars, as well as his significant advocacy for making sure we've got electric charging infrastructure in his electorate for buses as well. On the 16th of May, of course, this parliament legislated a new vehicle efficiency standard for Australia. This is a reform that has been 2 decades in the making. The member for Bradfield, of course, when he was last minister, couldn't get that through his party room, tried to put it through, but it has taken this government to actually deliver what has been on the books for 2 decades. The passage of this bill will mean that Australians can start to benefit from more efficient cars, whether they are petrol vehicles, whether they are hybrid vehicles, diesel or electric vehicles, with an estimated fuel savings of $95 billion in 2050.
Order.
This reform has caught up with the rest of the world. The US has had a standard in place for over 50 years, and across the world 85% of new cars are covered by a vehicle efficiency standard. Australians were not getting the choice of new vehicles they deserved, and along with Russia, we stood as one of the only advanced economies without such a standard. I particularly want to acknowledge Toyota, Hyundai, Tesla, the Motor Trades Association of Australia, the Australian Automobile Dealers Association, the Electric Vehicle Council for their positive engagement and supportive comments. On the passage of the bill, the FCAI said that they welcomed our standard and that they have always recognised the importance of a government-mandated CO2 standard for Australia. The Motor Trades Association welcomed our workable compromise with industry through good faith negotiations, while the Automotive Dealers Association welcomed our ambitious standard, which will significantly lower vehicle emissions. What we know is that Australia's new vehicle efficient standards are ambitious and achievable. They're the right standard for Australia that will deliver Australians more choice, save Australians thousands at the bowser, particularly regional Australians, reduce emissions and ensure Australians can continue to buy the utes and the SUVs that they love. Now, I'm asked in the question what was standing in the way. Well, I can tell you what was standing in the way was the relentless negativity of those opposite, who have no no courage to actually do the reforms that are necessary to ensure that this country has a future made in Australia, a future for regional Australians, and that we can benefit from the significant transition that is occurring internationally. Those opposite never see a policy that they can say yes to.
Order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the member for Fadden.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration. An Afghan national referred to as ZJFQ had his visa cancelled after being convicted of both raping a 16-year-old girl and intercourse with a disabled 14-year-old child. The Albanese Labor government's watering down of the law has allowed this criminal to stay in Australia, making our country less safe. When will the Albanese Labor government apologise for this catastrophic mistake and reverse its Direction 99?
Give a call to the Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Fadden for his question. As I've said in answer to previous questions, these are visas which were cancelled and remain cancelled by my department in line with Ministerial Direction 99. What we have here are decisions of an independent tribunal to overturn the cancellation. That is, and I say again that Direction 99 did not and does not decrease the importance placed on the considerations such as the expectations of the Australian community and the protection of the community from crime. That remains unchanged under this government.
Give a call to the honourable member for Reid.
My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How is the Albanese Labor government reducing the cost of energy for families and small businesses? What policies would lead to higher energy prices that the government has rejected?
Give a call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the terrific member for Reid for her question. It was great to visit her electorate last week to talk about energy bill relief. And as the honourable member knows, last week we saw the final default market offer announced, and that showed Ausgrid customers, for the member for Reid, small business bills falling by 8% and residential bills falling by up to 2.6%. A lot more to do, Mr. Speaker, we recognise, but that was a good step forward. And of course, default market offers don't always go down; they sometimes go up. And the weekend was the second anniversary of the member for Hume hiding a 20% increase in the default market offer, Mr. Speaker. But also. We are delivering $300 in bill relief to every single Australian who gets an electricity bill. No forms to fill out, no application, delivered directly to Australian households and working in concert with state schemes including Queensland's and Western Australia's. Now, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member asked me also what policies would lead to higher electricity prices that the government has rejected. Now, we also last week saw the release of a report which confirmed what policies would put energy prices up, and that was a report by the CSIRO and AEMO called GenCost, which showed yet again that renewables are the cheapest form of energy and nuclear is the most expensive form of energy. It's a controversial point, Mr. Speaker. Controversial point. Not everyone agrees. Those opposite were falling over themselves to discredit the CSIRO. Now, I won't have time to run through all those members opposite. I may or may not get other opportunities during the week, Mr. Speaker, but I'll start, to be fair, I'll start with the most eloquent member of the opposition who really crystallised the opposition's concerns about the CSIRO. The House will not be surprised to know it was the member for New England. And his criticism was that the CSIRO is Australian.
Order.
He said, and I quote directly, "The CSIRO is, of course, an Australian organisation. It's like getting Mongolia to write a report on tropical rainforests. They don't have them. We don't have nuclear power in Australia, so we do have a nuclear reactor, in fact. We've got one smack bang in the middle of Sydney. No one in Sydney seems to worry about it much, but the CSIRO, if it is." So that clears that up, Mr. Speaker. That clears that up.
Order.
Very good to know.
Members on my right.
The member for Fairfax, not to be outdone, said, no, GenCost is about the cost of building, not about the cost of energy. So, under Tetonomics, if it's expensive to build, it's okay, it's cheap to run. I'm glad he's not in charge of housing policy, Mr. Speaker, because we'd be building multi-million-dollar mansions with cheap rent. That'd be his policy. Doesn't matter how much it costs to build, they're just cheap to run. And then Senator Hume said, well, I haven't seen GenCost, but I know it doesn't cost opposition policy. Now, I give her that, because we haven't seen opposition policy, Mr. Speaker. The previous government was all announcement, no delivery. These guys can't even get to an announcement, Mr Speaker. The policy's dead before they even announce it.
The Minister's time has concluded. Order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the member for North Sydney.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Treasurer, 1 in 8 Australians are currently living in poverty, with, according to the Grattan Institute, payments currently received by those under our job seeker programs being among the lowest in the OECD. In their advice to government ahead of the federal budget, the Economic Inclusion Advisory Committee recommended the government commit to a substantial increase in the base rates of job seeker and related working age payments. What analysis did the government undertake in consideration of this recommendation that led them to choose not to act on the recommendation in the most recent budget?
Give a call to the Treasurer.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and thanks to the honourable member for North Sydney for her question. We obviously take very seriously the recommendations of the Economic Inclusion Advisory Committee. I think from memory, and the relevant minister can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're acting or progressing on about half of the recommendations of that really important, well-regarded, well-respected committee. In the last budget, we increased in a permanent way the job seeker rate. In this budget, we went for another increase to Commonwealth Rent Assistance, which was recommended by the EAC, and we made other changes as well consistent with the recommendations of that body. What we have tried to do, Mr Speaker, and to the member for North Sydney over the course of our 3 budgets, is to provide cost of living help where we can, especially for the most vulnerable. 2 increases to Commonwealth Rent Assistance, an increase to job seeker, changing the parenting payment single, a whole range of changes that we have made. Now, I acknowledge that there are people in the sector, people that we respect and listen to very closely, who would like us to go further and faster. I do acknowledge that, and I acknowledge that at the ACOS gathering on Friday as well. I have immense respect for the community groups and leaders who are calling for an even bigger increase to social security. As a Labor government, we will always look to do what we can to help people who are doing it especially tough. I think from memory, the expansion of the safety net is somewhere between, depending on what payment you're on, between $1,500 and $3,000 a year since we came to office. I acknowledge that when it comes to the working age payments, about 1/3 of that is us and about 2/3 of that is indexation. But when it comes to rent assistance, about 2/3 is us and 1/3 of that is indexation. Long way of saying, Mr Speaker, and to the honourable member, that we will continue to do what we can to help people who are doing it tough. We have made some progress, but we acknowledge in the member's question and in all of the engagement that the minister and I do with the sector that there is an appetite to go further. And what we have shown, I think, in the course of our 3 budgets is a willingness to do that where we can.
Give a call to the member for Paterson.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How are the Albanese Labor government's closing the labour loopholes laws delivering a better deal for workers, including in the mining industry, Minister? And are there any threats to this progress?
Give the call to the Minister for Employment, Workplace Relations and Minister for the Arts.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. And I thank the member for Paterson, who's had a very strong commitment to closing the labour hire loophole. And when she spoke last year in November on the closing loopholes legislation, the member for Paterson referred to workers in the mining industry trying to get a permanent shirt. Workers in the mining industry working side by side with other workers, doing the same job, same hours, side by side, but some employed by a labour hire company and some employed directly. I'm pleased to report, and some of you may have already seen this in an article that Ewan Hannon published in The Australian, that the pay rises of us having closed the labour hire loophole have already commenced. But what I think might have surprised some people was the extent of the underpayment that some of these workers were receiving. Now remember, this is an underpayment that those opposite said no to closing this loophole. They said you had to keep this underpayment. So for workers doing the exact same work, going to the exact same meetings every start of the shift, working the same rotating roster, sharing their breaks in the same crib huts on site, It turns out the pay gap for these workers at Mount Pleasant Coal Mine in the Hunter Valley, operated by Thiess, but some of the workers not employed by Thiess, some employed by a labour hire company, interestingly called Programmed. That was the name of the labour hire company. The underpayment was between $37,000 and $45,000 a year. Now, only because the law was changed, those workers, it was announced last week, are now going to be directly employed. Now, what does that mean in terms of your weekly pay? Because from the 1st of July, they're not just looking at a pay rise, they're also looking at a tax cut. And when you combine for these workers the pay rise because of the laws we changed, law changes they opposed, and the tax cut, a tax cut they also didn't want us to deliver, these workers are looking at getting $500 more in their pay packet every single week. $500 in their pay packet every week that those opposite and this Leader of the Opposition didn't want them to get the pay rise, didn't want them to get the tax cut. One of those workers, Danielle, been there for 2.5 years, has been working at the labour hire company. She said, for us to all be on the same rate of pay and have the same conditions will be a game changer. We all do the same work. There's really no difference between someone who's wearing a Thiess label or a Programmed label in terms of what we do day to day. Where there is a difference in a government that says yes to them getting $500 a week and a Leader of the Opposition committed to saying no.
Can call to the member for Hughes.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Immigration. Lebanese national Abdul Wahad Trad had his visa cancelled after being convicted of 2 counts of raping a child between 10 and 14 years and 3 counts of intentionally sexually touching a child under 16. The Albanese Labor government's watering down of the law has allowed this criminal to stay in Australia, making our country less safe. When will the Albanese Labor government apologise for this catastrophic mistake and reverse Direction 99?
Call to the Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. As I've said in relation to similar questions, this is a visa that was cancelled and remained cancelled by my department in line with Ministerial Direction 99. I believe these visas should remain cancelled, and I prioritise the number of cases for urgent cancellation consideration to that effect.
Call to the honourable member for Chisholm.
Thanks so much, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Skills and Training. How is the Albanese Labor government supporting more people to complete their training and get into secure, well-paid work? What approaches has the government rejected?
Give a call to the Minister for Skills and Training.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Can I thank the member for Chisholm for her question and her strong advocacy for TAFE. Can't wait to get back to Holmes Glen TAFE very soon because they're doing great work there. Can I say, Speaker, in the last 2 years the Albanese government has enacted big reforms and deepened its investment in education training. We've had to work fast because we inherited the biggest skills shortage in more than 50 years from those opposite. Last year alone, more than 355,000 Australians enrolled in fee-free TAFE, and a further 320,000 fee-free TAFE places from this year on are available to enrol in investment, which is absolutely vital. We also struck a national skills agreement with state and territories, the first agreement of its kind in a decade, providing $30 billion of security of investment to the vet sector, which is critical. We're creating centres of excellence, bringing TAFEs and universities and industry together. And it was great to hear how industry responded to the budget, Speaker. Master builders welcomed the focus on encouraging more women into trades and the announcement of more fee-free TAFE places in housing. The ACTU said our investment in education and training was needed after a decade of inaction and denial under those opposite. Yeah, we're allowed to mention unions in the chamber, it's okay. Bran Black from BCA said Brad Black from Business Council said government's commitment to reforming Australia's skills system is welcomed by business. He added the Business Council was pleased with the investments in growing the construction and housing workforce. However, his response to the opposition leader's budget reply on skills was to warn that, and I quote, "it may compound our existing skill shortages and make it harder to do business." That's what BCA thinks of the Leader of the Opposition. Ennis Willox of AI Group said, and I quote, "The budget makes important investments in skilling and training of our workforce and welcomes a focus on construction and housing." In contrast, he called the skills portion of the opposition leader's budget reply, and I quote, "a momentous act of economic self-harm." That's what the AI Group thinks of the budget in reply speech by the Leader of the Opposition, a completely momentous act of economic self-harm. Speaker, on this side of the chamber, we are supporting skills and education needed for a future made in Australia. By contrast, the opposition budget's reply has made it clear that they have no plan for the future for this country, a total disregard for skilling young people, supporting apprentices and giving industry the skills they need. Speaker, the only idea the opposition leader had was the bizarre call to duty for retirees to get back on the tools and supplement their pension. No wonder we have a skill shortage in this country with those ideas, Speaker. We'll continue to invest in skills in this country, and that's what we want.
The minister's time has concluded. To give the call to order. Order. Members on my right are not going to interject so I can hear this question. Member for Hume has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer.
Order. Members on my right, I just said the next person who interjects on my right will leave the chamber. The member for Hume has the call and begin his question again.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Does the Treasurer agree with the Minister for Industry that there should be a reduction in the company tax rate?
Give the call to the Treasurer.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and it's a very welcome opportunity, a very rare opportunity indeed, to get a question from the Shadow Treasurer, even though a budget was handed down from this dispatch box a couple of weeks ago. Mr Speaker, I saw the comments that the Industry Minister made at the Fin Review gathering earlier today, and they are entirely consistent with the sorts of things that we have been saying for some time. And what he said was that the corporate tax system has a role to play in incentivising manufacturing capital. And it might just have dawned on those opposite, but that was a central feature of the budget, Mr Speaker. That was a central feature of the budget 2 weeks ago, to use the tax system to incentivise the kind of investment and production that we want to see to power the good, secure, well-paid jobs of the future in industries like manufacturing, Mr Speaker. And I say, in addition to that, Mr Speaker, that the Industry Minister and I, indeed the Energy Minister, the Resources Minister, the Prime Minister, the Infrastructure Minister and others, have worked very, very closely to put together a tax package in this budget that we're very proud of. And we're very proud of it because it recognises that we can use the tax system and tax breaks for corporate Australia to incentivise a future made in Australia, Mr Speaker. And so a large proportion, indeed most of the $23 billion of the Future Made in Australia package that I announced from this dispatch box almost exactly 2 weeks ago was about company tax reform in the form of production tax credits. In addition to that, Mr Speaker, and here I pay tribute to the Small Business Minister, we're also extending the instant asset write-off for small business, also in the company tax system. And I think it says something about the absolute bin fire of incoherence and incompetence on that side of the House, Mr Speaker, that at the same time as
the Treasurer will pause. Order. Members on my right, I want to hear from the member for Hume.
Relevance, Mr Speaker. It was a very specific question on a very specific policy, and if he doesn't have the authority to answer the question, he should just sit down.
The Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, it was a specific question on a specific area of policy, and the Treasurer is being specifically relevant to it.
Order. Just going to ask the Treasurer. He wasn't asked about alternative policies. He wasn't asked about the opposition. He wasn't asked about the shadow. Order. He's not entitled to critique the opposition policy. He can talk about the government policy of which he was asked about. But order. The Leader of the Opposition. No. No. Nice try. Resume your seat. Just resume your seat. Resume your seat, Leader of the Opposition. Order. So we've dealt with the point of order. It is not an opportunity to critique the opposition. The Treasurer will return to the question.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. The irony of being asked about coherence by two guys who can't explain a budget reply which was given 2 weeks ago. Mr Speaker. My
the Treasurer will return to the question.
Mr Speaker, give me a break.
The Treasurer will return to the question, or he will resume his seat.
Mr Speaker, I'm asked about the company tax system. I'm asked about the industry minister's remarks earlier today. I'm asked about incentivising production and investment in manufacturing. We are doing those things. That's the key part of the budget. That's the point I made at the very beginning of my answer, Mr Speaker, and I have been proud to work with the industry minister and with the other colleagues to put together a package which is all about using the tax system to power the good, secure, well-paid jobs that we want to see in communities right around Australia so that we can build that future made in Australia together.
Order. Give the call to the member for Spence.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. How is the Albanese Labor government's responsible economic management repairing the budget and cleaning up the mess it inherited?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Speaker, and thanks to the member for Spence. Because of his work, 74,000 people in his electorate will get a tax cut, and about the same will get energy bill relief as well. Our responsible economic management is all about fighting inflation and repairing the budget and paying down Liberal debt, Mr Speaker, not as an end in itself, but to make room for our priorities: Medicare, cost of living help, skills and education and housing. And we saw all that in the budget. The budget also showed that our government has helped engineer a stunning turnaround in the nation's finances in our first 2 years. We have turned 2 big Liberal deficits into 2 Labor surpluses. Last year we turned a projected $78 billion Liberal deficit into a $22 billion Labor surplus. This year we're turning a $57 billion Liberal deficit into a $9 billion Labor surplus, Mr Speaker. A $165-ish billion turnaround in 2 years and $215 billion overall. Debt this year is $150 billion lower because of our efforts, $185 billion next year because of our efforts. We're saving $80 billion in debt interest over the course of the next decade, and gross debt will peak much lower because of our responsible economic management. We've found the savings, we've shown the spending restraint. All of that would be foreign to those opposite, Mr Speaker. When we came to office, there was debt and deficit as far as the eye could see. There was more than $1 trillion in Liberal debt in a budget which was heaving with rorts and waste that we have been cleaning up, Mr Speaker. They had 9 cracks at a surplus and couldn't deliver a single one. Now, last week, Mr Speaker, as the member for Hume was humiliating himself at the National Press Club, he was talking about fiscal guardrails and tax to GDP caps. He forgot to mention the highest taxing government of the last 30 years was the Howard Costello government, Mr Speaker, or that average real spending growth on our watch is a fraction of what it was on their watch, Mr Speaker. And when he talks about overspending, get this, when he talks about overspending, he talks about $300 billion in overspending. That includes the indexation of the age pension. That includes the indexation of pensions that go to veterans. That includes the indexation of pensions and payments that people rely on. No wonder they didn't come clean in their budget reply about the attacks that would come to Medicare and pensions and payments and all the rubbish we saw with robo-debt last time when they came to office, Mr Speaker. Last time they went after Medicare, they went after people on payments, and that's why they won't come clean on how they'll pay for their tax cuts for people on the highest incomes. Theirs was the most shambolic response to a budget in memory. It was a bin fire of incompetence and incoherence and chaos and confusion. Now, Mr Speaker, we are the party of responsible economic management, and we won't be taking lectures from those opposite who made the mess that we are now cleaning up.
Call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I ask for the question placed on the notice paper.